going on, guys? GZTV back with our second video of the day of 3. Obviously, you guys are going to get the NBA recap later tonight, but we have The Last of Us. We have the second episode of the series, week 2 of this thing, and we're trying to see. So far, this is the best video game adaptation. I didn't really play the game that much, so I was still kind of confused throughout this episode, but it's still very enjoyable. It's still a story you can cling on to. It is somewhat cliche in moments, but yeah, it's nonetheless fun to watch. We're focusing on the clickers this episode, which is something we haven't really explored, like the actual infected people. You know, we know what the virus is, we know kind of what its potential is, we've heard discussions, and all these flashbacks in the intro are always great. But we don't really know, like, what these things do, what they are, everything about them. So yeah. So this episode starts in Indonesia 2003. You love, like, the flashbacks, the different locations, different ways people are treating the virus. Authorities show up and take a woman away. This is Ibu Ratna, a professor in mycology who happens to be working at the nearby university. So they find her and they take her in. They need her help to try to combat what's happening with the infection. They need her advice. They need her insight to tell them what exactly they need to do. She's brought to the lab and shown a specimen of the cordyceps. Specifically, this happens to be an infected human who has been bitten on her left leg. Ibu is convinced they can't survive, but we know they can. There's a way. This show is not using the same cause of infection with the spores as the games. Ibu examines the woman and notices tendrils in her mouth, the same that you see from the infected in episode 1. Ibu is shocked to learn that patient 0, the first person to spread the infection by biting, is still out there, but Ibu has been brought in to try and find a vaccine and cure what's occurring. There is no vaccine, she says chillingly. Instead, she suggests they start bombing the city with everyone still inside. Man, it's so chilling. This is a very chilling intro. They had another chilling intro for episode 1. This show just keeps delivering. They deliver this concept of this cordyceps virus through different contexts, and they do it so well. So yeah. Meanwhile, Ellie wakes up with sunlight beaming down on her. She's in like this grass and this like opening. She's inside a building with Joel and Tess both eyeing her suspiciously. Obviously, they know she's been bit, and people say she's immune, but who can you really trust in an apocalypse? And we kind of learn that type of sentiment on a show like The Walking Dead. Who can you really trust? She brings up her test and how Marlene locked her up, checking to see if she gets infected every day with her accounting. As for Joel, his wrist is broken with a hairline fracture, but he shrugs it off, claiming it'll heal soon. He realizes they have to keep moving. He can't let this fracture, slow him down. In fact, he wants to take Ellie back and find another way to get the car battery, but Tess talks him into continuing, we gotta keep going on this trip. We came so far, we've traveled so far, we can't just stop right here. Tess tries to get more details out of Ellie, demanding to know her importance. Why is she important? Why are people, beholding her as this, they're, marveling at her as an eighth wonder of the world. Ellie rolls her eyes and eventually points out there's a Firefly base camp out west where they're working on a cure. Now, she hasn't told that many people about this, but these people know, so yeah. Joel again decides they need to head back, but Tess again convinces him to continue, no, we gotta keep going here. Joel is this is a terrible idea, and it probably is if we look at what happened in the episode. As they venture out, we learn most of the big cities were bombed in the wake of this infection. They took the Indonesian woman's advice, and that was a worldwide thing. Let's just bomb all the major cities, and the people that survived can refuge to the smaller parts of the world. The State House is about 10 minutes away, but it's a precarious trip. Joel is at the back while Ellie and Tess talk. Ellie points out she was 14 when she was infected and reveals that she's grown up an orphan. She doesn't have a mother, she doesn't have a dad, she doesn't have any siblings. So maybe that's why she acts the way she is, and she's so cold-hearted about the whole thing, because obviously a normal child would probably panic. There aren't swarms of infected roaming the streets, but that's not to say there aren't worse things out there. There are plenty of different monsters in this show. As an ominous scream from the distance confirms as much as the group press on through a flooded hotel. Ellie replicates a few of her jokes from the game, but given they come with ringing the bell loudly and they're inevitably infected around, it's not a smart move. The whole, that's gonna hurt them in the end. Anyway, they make it up 10 floors and miraculously the gang are completely dry. That's game accurate, I suppose. Eventually, Ellie and Joel talk, but they barely say 2 words to one another without it turning into scarthing retorts to one another. These people, they kind of have an up and down relationship early on in their interaction. They're kind of shaky on each other at the moment. Ellie mentions the guard he beat to death on the subject of regretful deaths, but before Joel can reply, Tess returns, so they realize Tess doesn't want Tess to hear them like fighting. They need to be a group. They need to bond together. And you can kind of sense this like rivalry, like this father-daughter type of rivalry, weird relationship going on between the two. I haven't played the game, so this is all new to me. If you're watching the video like, dude, this already happened in the game, just save it. I didn't really play this game. I play a lot of video games. I played a lot of story games, but this is not one of them. So, and I don't regret it, because now that we have a TV adaptation, like, this works perfectly. Having secured the morale through the building, they press on and find all the infected together down on the streets and spilling out a nearby building. So they realize that a threat is nearby. Tess points out that the cordyceps is all connected, and stepping on a piece in one area can bring in others from a different area. That's like a different dynamic, a unique dynamic that you wouldn't get from like The Walking Dead. Like, you make contact with the virus in one location, it'll attract the other people with the virus. That's kind of a cool concept. This is a great bit of foreshadowing, as we'll see from the moments ahead. With a long way around and no-go, the only solution is to go directly through the museum, the shortcut. Although the place looks to be overgrown by fungus and the cordyceps, and if they come into contact with it, well, they're going to get attacked. It doesn't matter if they make noises or not. Outside, though, is all bone dry, so the trio decide to press on and continue through the building. Unfortunately, they run into bigger problems when a clicker shows up, which they make like clicking noises. They make these very disturbing, snarling noises. The sound design here is fantastic, especially as this creature shambles into the room and is joined by another. Joel tells them all not to make a sound, so Ellie does it, and it causes Joel to fight one off. Ellie just doesn't know how to listen, and it's kind of funny, honestly. They're like the walkers. They can't see people, but they can hear everything. There are some genuinely tense scenes here as Joel and Ellie try to survive. We know they're going to survive, of course. It's Joel who manages to get the killer blow on both foes, and they come away with Ellie scratched and Tess sporting a twisted ankle. Now, this is why they should have crafted some shivs. After the clicker encounter, the group head up to the roof. Tess has twisted her ankle, so Joel helps her out, like wraps it up in tape. Yeah, you're good to go. Tess bemoans Joel's negative attitude and encourages him to go and see Ellie instead. Okay, Jesse Torres said this from the perspective of someone who has played the game. This is the best video game adaptation. I think it's a great show. So the fact that it's a great show to me and I haven't played the game, like that tells you something, I think. So, you know, Joel's kind of being negative and like not believing in the group, and Tess kind of like confronts him about it and whatever. I mean, this is a spoiler review, so I'm talking about the plot. So if you haven't played the game or watched the show, go do that before you watch these. The scene is perfectly worked from the game, apparently. I mean, I've seen like YouTube videos of people doing like the side by side thing before I made this video, so I kind of know there's scenes taken from the game like perfectly, and it's so surreal. I bet, you know, seeing that, I think that's a cool experience with Joel and Ellie looking at the State House in the distance. It's a brief moment before they continue on. The group make it to the State House, you know, where everything goes down, where Joel goes forward and investigates. blood splatters, fresh ones, indicate someone is inside the building. So there is someone in the building, infected or not. They're not sure yet, but they're going to find out really soon that someone was infected, and they come into contact with the virus and everything goes to crap. So Tess goes ahead with Ellie, where they find several deceased on the floor. Joel takes out the rear and observes the damage. Okay. Yeah, I like how they expanded the backstory and kind of added their own elements. That's really cool, honestly. Because it's easy to just copy straight from the game, but these people did not do that, the creators of the show. It doesn't look like Phaedra are involved, unlike in the games, and all the Fireflies have been killed after being infected. I kind of like notes here or whatever. Tess decides to stay, pointing out that she's infected, and then they just now find out she's been hiding it this whole time, and that's kind of like a dangerous thing, honestly. Now, instead of the guards banging at the door and Tess's sacrifice being one to save the group, gut-wrenching because of the lack of time they have, instead we get a much slower paced goodbye. She's infected, she has to stay and just accept her fate at this point. It's very sad, but things have to happen. Bad things happen when there's an apocalypse like this. I guess you could call it an apocalypse. Tess convinces Joel to press on and go to Bill and Frank's place. Keep her alive. You gotta set everything right. You gotta fulfill this mission. Ellie's arm healed up. Like, she's the chosen one. You have to carry on with this. When one of the infected move on the ground, Joel shoots it in the head. The tendrils move as it seems the infected have been roused and are coming. Yeah, that was probably a mistake. He kind of stimulated the infected person there. Tess decides to try and buy them some time, making sure the infected don't follow by pouring oil all over the floor, followed by a handful of grenades. You gotta save anyone you can save in this situation. Tess struggles to get her lighter to work as floods them and the infected pour into the building. It's obviously like the plot device where you're like, the dramatic device, oh, I can't get this lighter to go, but I'll get it to go eventually. She could just shoot a grenade at the floor, but I don't know. Anyway, she eventually manages to get her lighter to work, but only after one of the infected assaults and kisses her with its tendril sticking in her mouth. That is disgusting. Why the hell did she let that happen? The whole place erupts into a brilliant explosion as Joel and Ellie manage to get out with a single infected following and press on to their next destination. So the voyage will continue in the next episode, but the second episode changes big parts of the game's story, and while some parts are quite intriguing, like the beginning in Indonesia, other parts aren't quite. Before we dive into that, it's worth pointing out the excellent parts of this chapter. The whole encounter with the clickers was absolutely pitch perfect, with the sound design throughout being absolutely fantastic. The changed lore with the infected, showing off the tendrils that are all connected, is a nice touch too, but it also negates Tess and Ellie's bit of dialogue where they discuss the infected giving off fungal spores when killed, which was kind of like an inconsistency they had there. The production design looks great, and some of the moments ripped from the game, like Ellie pretending to be a customer at the hotel or those moments on the roof, give off the most authentic version of this young girl. Unfortunately, everything else leaves a lot to be desired. A big part of the game's allure comes from the developing relationship between Joel and Ellie over time. They go from strangers who dislike one another to essentially a father-daughter tie, with some great moments along the way. The TV show, though, disrupts that slightly with a bizarre flashback at the end of episode 1, and then takes 26 minutes before Joel and Ellie even say anything to one another. In fact, all of those sequences with Ellie and Tess talking to one another would have worked so much better if Tess and Joel switched places, allowing Joel to learn more information about this young girl. Instead, it's a character that they kill off in the episode. That doesn't really make sense. I still think it's a good episode, but that's a big flaw to this. The relationship between the pair could still become something special in the future, but right now the ties between them aren't anywhere near as good as it was in the game. There's enough to like here to stick with it for the long haul. I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. GZTV is always giving you guys the best TV show content. That does it. So, That's my only flaw. They didn't expand on the Joel. Apparently, there's a big relationship between the two. They didn't expand on that enough. I watched people play